Right. So there's a war brewing between Kevin McCarthy and Ilhan Omar. Kevin McCarthy, and we could put up, what have we got, D1 here. Kevin McCarthy has vowed that he's going to kick Ilhan Omar off the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I don't know if he has singled out any particular offense. Benjamin's tweet.
He said anti-Semitism.
Right. He's just generally calling her an anti-Semite. The Democrats had stepped across this line and had kicked Marjorie Taylor Greene off of her committee assignments.
Right, by a vote.
And so this is, and they've also suggested that they're going to kick Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell off the Intelligence Committee. Do you know if they're still going to do that?
Yeah, so what McCarthy told me back in September is that he was booting for sure Ilhan Omar and Eric Swalwell off their committees. I've heard Schiff floated as well, and I think that's probably going to happen, frankly. But where this is interesting is that it's a response to Pelosi's, what a lot of people see, even people who follow congressional procedure in the history of it, see as a centralization of power in the Speaker's office during the course of the Pelosi era. And one of those ways was booting people of the opposite party off their committees because she did it with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then people were upset with what happened at the J6 committee. Now, Kevin McCarthy, according to people that I checked with on this, cannot unilaterally just boot people from the committee. It would have to be a full vote. And if Republicans have the majority, they can vote down a committee assignment that has Ilhan Omar on it. Or they could vote for and create committee assignments that don't have Ilhan Omar or Eric Swalwell on them. So that's what it would actually look like in practice during the vote. So it's kind of a technical question, but they can do it. And it seems like they're poised to.
And to me, it's outrageous to kick her off of a committee. A committee is a place where people who are elected by residents in their district, by voters in their district, to represent them in Congress. It reminds me of, I think it was in 1916, 1917, voters from, people could look it up, Montana or somewhere, elected a woman who was against the World War I, a socialist. Congress refused to seat her. 2 years later, they sent her back again. And for a long time, they refused to seat her again. Like, who are you to tell the voters in this district, I think, whether or not this person gets to represent you? If you don't like it, I'd say run a candidate against Ilhan Omar, move to Minneapolis, vote against Ilhan Omar. But to start saying that because of a person's views, which you then characterize as anti-Semitic, that they can't be on a committee, just annihilates the entire idea of Congress as a place where you're deliberating in order to write laws. Even if you said, oh, she's anti-Semitic, I don't think she is. I think that there are Republicans, and actually she said this in her statement. If we could put up D2, Ilhan Omar's kind of response. If you guys, you could pause this and read it to yourselves. I'm not going to read it to you. And if you're on the podcast, you're going to have to Google and find it.
But it's really long. We're talking about like a 500-word statement.
Right, but she quotes several people, several Republican members of Congress saying explicitly anti-Semitic stuff about like Jews buying Congress and things like that. That if she had said it would lead to weeks of controversy. But if a Republican member of Congress is able to say it says it, then it's just, oh, well, this is their take.
Well,
so I think on the merits, it's wrong, but I think on the principle of it, it's deeply dangerous to what's left of the institution.
So I agree with that on one particular level, which is that this question of who are you to tell the people that elected this person, you in Washington, a member of your party leadership, who are you to say this to the voters of the Minneapolis area? 100% I agree with that. I think what Republicans are doing is trying to zero in on people that are the easiest examples to follow Pelosi and give Democrats a taste of what they see as their own medicine for centralizing power and changing norms, what people saw as norms of the House. And I get why sort of tactically you zero in on Ilhan Omar, because you can probably get Democrats even to join that vote. You can probably get a Josh Gottheimer to get in on that vote for a foreign affairs committee that doesn't include Ilhan Omar. There's a difference between standing committees and select committees like January 6th. Foreign affairs is a standing committee. That's why it requires a full vote. And you can get basically every Republican united in favor of booting her. The real thing that they'll probably, I mean, if they're smart, what they'll zero in on is her tweet where she walked this back, but it basically equated the Taliban with Israel and America. And again, she walked it back. Well, it was a bad tweet.
We talked about that. She was saying that everybody commits human rights abuses.
Yes. Oh, that is what we talked about.
That's right. That's right.
And we've talked about it many times since. But that's the one, that's the foreign affairs, like in terms of whether someone should represent us on the Foreign Affairs Committee, that's probably Republicans' best argument. That said, one of the things that drives me insane about the Marjorie Taylor Greene discourse is that, and it's the same thing with Ilhan Omar, and I would hope that Ilhan Omar would extend this to Marjorie Taylor Greene, no matter how much they may dislike each other, and even have stronger emotions than dislike towards each other. I would hope that they would both see how the sort of Washington mentality of isolating both of them, using power, weaponizing power, abusing it to isolate both of them, how that's bad precedent, period. Because once you do it to Marjorie Taylor Greene, you can do it to Ilhan Omar. And like, even if the threshold for an offense is different, because you've set the precedent and you make one party kick back because it got kicked. So it's going to kick back because that's what its voters want it to do. And you change the precedent to make it happen. Because that's the thing that drives me nuts about the Marjorie Taylor Greene discourse is, frankly, she's talked about this, a low trust voter, right? Like, she had zero trust in any institutions, and that's not irrational. It is not irrational for anybody to have no trust in our institutions. It's not an apology for any of the crazy stuff she said or an excuse for any of the crazy stuff she said. It's just that what ultimately people like Nancy Pelosi don't like about the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world, and even the radical, not like, I don't mean radical in a pejorative sense, but like actual leftists that make their way into Congress, what Nancy Pelosi doesn't like about them is that they don't trust anything. They don't trust. There were people who were 9/11 truthers who got into government from the Democratic side of the aisle. And Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of those people, by the way. They don't trust anybody. And that is, to borrow a phrase, representative of the American people. And so, yeah, the House of Representatives is going to have some problematic people in it because we're a country where there are problematic people. Right. And it's not entirely the fault of every single problematic person because the government has given them no reason to believe anything that they say.
But how does Kevin McCarthy square this with the GOP panic about cancel culture? So when Ilhan Omar first got raked across the coals for her Benjamins tweet, and then the point of her tweet was all about the Benjamins, and it was actually about Kevin McCarthy because Kevin McCarthy was
yes. You interviewed her about that.
I did. Yes, I did at some point. Yeah. And what she was saying is that she believes that the amount of money that AIPAC is able to raise and spend in elections influences Congress. Somehow, that's a controversial thing to say. I think it's clearly obvious. Like, that's why special interest groups raise and spend money so that they can have influence. She then met with a bunch of her Jewish friends who were like, look, yes, like those facts are true. Here's the history, here are the tropes, here are the reasons that this is heard in this particular way. She's like, you know what? You're speaking to me in good faith here. I can see that you mean what you're saying. I'm sorry. And she put out a public and I think heartfelt apology and explained why she had gotten to a place where she said, you know what, I'm sorry that I hurt people with what I had said. It was not my intent, and has not said that since then. Now I think to say that Israel and the United States, Hamas and Taliban all commit human rights abuses, I think is just true. She's going to say things like that. I don't think that's anti-Semitic. But
well, she walked it back because she said, I didn't mean to imply that the scale was the same between all of them.
Right, and so, right, but it's not anti-Semitic, right? Yeah. Right, but it's not a case of whether it's anti-Semitic or not.
Right, no, I agree with that. Yeah.
And so,
but in terms of foreign affairs.
So if you say that you're against cancel culture, somebody does something that you find offensive. They grow from that. They say that they apologize for it.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, you kick them off a committee for that thing?
I think it's ridiculous.
You're a hypocrite of the highest order.
You know, I think this is less about what Ilhan Omar said and more about kicking back at Nancy Pelosi. I genuinely think that's what this is about, is like making a point to Democrats that the way they weaponized the House and House rules and procedure and changed House rules and procedure while crying about norms during the Trump era is going to come back on them because Republican voters are sick of it. I think that's ultimately what this is about. That said, I actually think outside of Congress, I mean, I don't expect partisans to not be hypocritical. They're always hypocritical. Republicans or Democrat, Kevin McCarthy, Nancy Pelosi, they're going to step into hypocrisy because it's about power. But I think on an ideological front, yeah, like it's a huge problem, and it's been a huge problem because the definition of anti-Semitism is inflated beyond where it should be a lot of times. And that's not to say there aren't very real problems. I think Ilhan Omar, as you just pointed out, stumbled into one of them, which is using these tropes in that context. It's like extremely, like obviously a problem. But when people especially, and another thing, like I don't want to be in a position where I'm defending Marjorie Taylor Greene because I'm really not like trying to defend the Marjorie Taylor Greene. She walked back her QAnon stuff and explained exactly why she got it wrong. Talked about the fact that she was just basically a small business owner mom in Georgia who had no faith left in the government. And if the media should have covered that way more than it did, because it's actually an interesting thing that I think happens to people frequently that get kind of sucked into, for understandable reasons, those types of conspiracy theories. But I think one of the biggest like manifestations of elite bias in Washington is against like conspiracy theorists, because people have good reasons to stumble in those conspiracy theories. It doesn't make the conspiracy theory right, but it also makes your like patronizing approach to them unhelpful and unconstructive and actually counterproductive, because there's no justification for what happened and what's happening to the country as a whole. So I think the definition of anti-Semitism is inflated unhelpfully. There's no question about it. I think this is more just about power politics at the end of the day, and I would love to try to see them justify it. But, you know, obviously I agree. I think it's hypocritical.
Yeah, they're just going to say she's this scary anti-Semite lady and kick her off the committee.
Yeah.
It's cowardly and atrocious.
I wouldn't be surprised, though, if there's a handful of Democrats who go along with it.
Yeah, Josh Gottheimer, we'll see.
Well, I mean,
But
Hakeem Jeffries, yeah. I mean, this is like people that absolutely, any criticism of Israel, you know this better than I do.
Hakeem Jeffries as leader is going to be in a difficult spot. You know how he wants to vote on that.
Exactly.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.